The legacy of Mr. Gilbert is crucial to keep passing on to others. There's been books written, one of course by Angeleita Floyd, which is, we call it the Flute Bible. Everybody has it, even non-Gilbert people.
I refer to it almost on a weekly, if I'm not daily basis, with my students, either about posture or breathing or phrasing. They get to know Mr. Gilbert through the Gilbert legacy and through us.
Sometimes you need it written down and you need the pictures to show the students, then they get it. You know, this is a real person, and he influenced James Galway that you're listening to, and you know.
I think many of us would say that the work that Dr. Floyd has done in the first Gilbert legacy and in the work that she continues to do, this is a tremendous contribution to the flute world internationally, really.
So I think perhaps in a conversation, or as I started thinking about how his teaching was so unique, and having to describe it, I would talk about how unique it was, because I had studied with many other people, and I realized that Geoffrey Gilbert's teaching was just so much more better organized in its method and its effectiveness, all of that. So there came the time that I thought, well, I'd really like to, maybe I could write something about his teaching. And then I remember being so, really scared to ask Geoffrey Gilbert if he would, if I could do that, because my association with him had always been extremely, student and teacher, and I knew he was a very private man, and I thought, how would he react to this? He might say no. What would I do if he, So I remember going for a lesson and having a conversation with him, I think at the end of the lesson, and just saying, there's something I want to talk to you about, and I would like to write my doctoral treatise about your teaching concepts and your methods. And he really, and he said it years later, or months later, a year later or two, in an interview actually, but he said at that time, Angeleita, I don't know that I have a method. Doesn't everyone teach like this? And I kind of went, no, they don't. But he honestly thought that was just the most logical, sensible way to go about it. So
I'm sure it was very challenging for her to get him to be open about his personal life. I'm sure talking about the flute was a much more comfortable and natural thing for him to do, but it's terrific to see the person as part of the picture that is portrayed in that book. The Gilbert legacy is such an incredibly painstaking and clear codification of the techniques, the methods of playing the flute according to Geoffrey Gilbert. What an incredible opportunity for my students now. They can know him through his own words, through pictures of his own hands and embouchure, for example, his own body stance, in his own studio. It's as if you're right there.
I was absolutely thrilled that Geoffrey Gilbert was able to read every word I wrote. I set up the book in an interesting format where I used so much of quoted material from him because I had it from these classes. And I thought this way people would hear his own words. And then part of what I could do was explain, what that meant and how to do it and put it together. I couldn't edit his writing or his speaking, but he could. And that was able and allowed things to flow a little better, or he could say, Angeleita, this is not quite right, let's use this word. It was wonderful. So maybe in that process I went through 5 different revisions of the treatise. It was sort of chapter by chapter. When it got towards the end, it might be more. He read everything, and so I felt so good. I started the process with such a great sense of respect for him, also thinking, I'm not writing what I'm saying or how I teach or what I believe. I'm writing what Geoffrey Gilbert teaches and believes, and I felt tremendous sense of responsibility to get it right.
As far as the impact and importance of the Gilbert legacy, I can't begin to explain it.
When Geoffrey Gilbert died in '89, it was such a cry of, missing him and his teaching, and that someone needed to do something about, what his teaching and how great it was. And I kind of went, I have this 300-page book that I wrote on him. And so I had a lot of support and encouragement to get the book actually published. But I found the right way to go about having, I think, the work published the way I liked it. So I did, and I was just staggered with the results of that. It was probably in the 90s, maybe in the mid-90s. I was in Ecuador at a flute festival, of all places, introduced to a Swedish flutist named Torleif Anders, and introduced myself. He was there as a guest artist from Sweden, and I was there as a guest artist from the United States. And I said, my name's Angeleita Floyd, and he looked at me and he said, "You wrote the Gilbert Legacy?" And I said, "Yes, I did." He said, "That book has changed my life." And I have gotten that kind of response from everybody that's read the book, I have to say.